Hello everybody. Today I'm going to be teaching you in my Teach Me project about the pectoral girdle, which includes the scapula, all the regions of the scapula, and the clavicle, which is also known as the collarbone. My way of studying is quizzing myself. That is the most effective way I can retain information, and I think this will be helpful to many other people. So, what I did to help out a little bit is I created my own Kahoot. I labeled the parts, and I'm quizzing myself on the parts of the scapula. And hopefully, this will help you remember which part is where. And I am going to be playing, and you are going to be following along with me. I am not competing against anybody today because it's just my own Kahoot. But let's get started. Hopefully it will display a picture on the screen. This picture right here. I only have 15 seconds to answer. So this I will explain. But this is the superior border of the scapula. And I know that it is correct because it is a border, and it's the highest border of the scapula out of the three borders, and that helps me remember it a little bit better. Let's move on to the next question. Okay. It's another identify the bony landmark. This, you think of lateral and medial. This is going to go in the middle, looking at this angle, so it would be the medial border of the scapula. Just to help out a little bit, medial means middle. It's going to face into your body instead of facing outwards. It's going to be closer to your heart and other regions. Okay, and we have our next question. It's another identify. These are all going to be identify the bony landmarks. So since the last one we did was the medial border, it would only make sense, since this one is facing outwards, that this would be pointing to the lateral border of the scapula. This is all going to be of the scapula, by the way. When you label this on your tests, you can label it like this, or you can put of the, but it's always important to identify the bone before you identify the bony landmark, just to make sure you're accurate and to make sure that you remember the actual bone. And remember, lateral, outwards, to the sides of, medial, middle. Next question. Identify the bony landmark. These are angles. There are only two angles. And since this one is down, this one is up, it would only make sense that this is the inferior angle of the scapula. Again, because it's a scapula, there are two angles, inferior, superior. Inferior means lower, infra means lower, under, whichever you want to think of it as, whichever makes it easier for you to remember. But it is one of the easiest ones for me to remember because it is the only and lowest angle of the bone. Next question. We're on question number 5 now to identify the bony landmark. We just did the inferior angle, which means up here would be superior, so that eliminates the option of the spine and border, because this is not a border, this is an angle, so this would be the superior angle of the scapula. It's the highest angle of the scapula. Superior means above, means higher up, highest up, if anything. That helps me remember. And it's pretty easy since there are only 2 angles that you have to remember, but you need to make sure that you're very accurate. That was question number 5. Now we're on to question number 6, which is also another identify the bony landmark. This one can be a little confusing. I think of it as it sticks up, so it is a spine of the scapula. It almost looks like a neck in a way if you really have an imagination for it, and that's how I remember that it's the spine. It is very prominent on the scapula, which makes it also much easier to remember. Just remember it's going along the spine of the scapula. And next question, we are moving on to question number 7 out of 16 questions, I believe. This one is the acromion process of the scapula, and I know this because I think of the first letter, A, which is above all and before all the other letters of the alphabet, so I think of it as the top one. Since there are 2 processes on the scapula, a higher and a lower, I think of A, higher, and the lower one, which I'm not going to reveal what it is yet, but the higher one is A, acromion process of the scapula. And we're going to move on to the next one, which is going to be the second process on the scapula. Question number 8 out of 16 questions, identify the bony landmark. This one is the coracoid process, not to be confused with the coronoid process. This one is lower, sticks out more, but since C is after A, I think of it as that, and C would be lower on the alphabetical scale. So the coracoid process is lower, not to be confused with the coronoid process, which is on the ulna. I remember it as ulna has the letter N, so coronoid would associate with the ulna, and coracoid with the scapula. Scapula has the letter C, coracoid, letter C. That would help me remember in case I ever get confused. But this is the coracoid process of the scapula. Don't forget what the bone is called. And we're going to move on to the next question. We are halfway done with our Kahoot. I will probably do some further explaining as we get further along in the Kahoot. But this is question 9 out of 16. We're going to identify another landmark on the scapula. This one was a little bit trickier for me to remember, So my camera stopped recording, but I'm going to continue this along. That was the scapular notch. I think of notch as like a dip in a way. And that's how I tend to remember it on the scapula, but I still want to continue on because there are still more regions to learn about the scapula. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next question, and I'm going to try to be very quick now. Identify the bony landmark. So this one is the supraspinous fossa, and it's not infra because it is higher, not lower than the spine. So, yes. And we're going to move on to question 11, which I just basically already revealed that this is the infraspinous fossa of the scapula because it is lower than the spine. That's how I tend to remember it. And that would be the correct answer. Moving on to the last few questions. This is 12 out of 16. This is identify the bony landmark. This one is very tricky for me, but I remember it as the biggest one, which is the subscapular fossa of the scapula. And that's the best way I can teach you to remember it. Sub meaning the back part in a way. Yeah. Anyways, next question would be number 13 out of 16. Identify the bony landmark. There are only a couple more. Bear with me, please. So, this thing is called the glenoid cavity of the scapula. Not so sure why it's a cavity, but I remember it as a flat surface, and yeah. Next question. Number 14 out of 16. This is a true or false. All of these pictures that I've been using is from the same scapula. So that one scapula is actually a left scapula. Looking at the pictures, I gave you a little bit of a reference to look at in case you got that one wrong. But that is a left scapula. If you like to see how it looks, you can look at a skeleton, probably in the classroom, or you can Google it. But it can be a little bit tricky to remember, but you can always use that picture as reference. 2 more questions left. What is this bone? This one is the clavicle, and it is also known as the collarbone. The humerus is the upper limb, tibia and femur are lower limbs, so this would be the only one that would make sense. Clavicle slash collarbone. And it is very close to the scapula, and that's why it is included in this Kahoot. And this would be the last question. If we need to know left and right for this class, this anatomy class, we do not need to know left and right. Correct. And we're going to go ahead. And I'm the only one playing, so technically I would win this Kahoot regardless. But I hope this helped out just a little bit in remembering which parts are where. And I hope you enjoyed this video and have a great weekend. Thank you so much.